Hope everybody is staying warm ahead of this blizzard coming to the New York area. I'm James Burley. Welcome back to Empire Soccer Report, Episode 4, and I'm joined by my first repeat guest in the show's history, Luca Richman of RBNY Experience. Luca, how you doing? Are you staying warm? Are you staying inside? Do you have everything you need ahead of this big blizzard coming?
James, yeah, I'm doing good. Thank you for the shout out, and I'm grateful to be the first repeat host and guest, I guess. And yeah, I'm staying warm. As you can see, I have a new mustache, which is kind of something I've been trying out. So we'll see if that survives the storm. But I'm kind of personally, I don't know. All these, I know the storm feels different, but I feel like it's always so hyped up in this area, and it never accumulates, and it's always like 3 to 4 inches that kind of melts. So I'm not going to say it's going to be that chill, but I wouldn't be surprised if everyone's like, "Bro, why are we hyping that up so much?" But yeah, two more months of winter and then into the spring. So it's cold season for sure.
Less than a month away from the MLS season. We'll see if the blizzard lives up to the hype. I think the mustache is living up to the hype. I mean, that's giving me flashes. We were talking before we started 2016, 2017 Sasha Kljestan. I think you're giving Tom Bogert a run for his money with that stash as
Yeah,
well.
I didn't even
So
think of Tom. Okay.
in good company there with the facial hair. But since we last were on Empire Soccer Report, there's been quite a bit going on around MLS, around Red Bull New York. I mean, so many major signings across the league and just great news that's coming in and out of everywhere. But we got to start right at home. Looks like the Red Bulls are going to have a new number one goalkeeper starting in 2026. Reports coming from Tom Bogert, the aforementioned, that Ethan Horvath, U.S. men's national team goalkeeper, is going to be headed to New Jersey this week to sort out personal terms with Red Bull New York. It's something that we've talked about to at least a certain degree on this show and in Red Bull media circles for a while. It seemed like Ethan Horvath was eyeing a move back to MLS around this time when his loan from Sheffield Wednesday expired. The 30-year-old goalkeeper who has 10 caps for the U.S. men's national team has never played professionally in America, moved out of the U.S., his native Colorado. At the age of 16, he's played in Europe ever since. And with all the other national team goalkeepers playing in Major League Soccer, it just made sense for him to go look back at MLS for a chance to get back into the national team, chance to be a number one goalkeeper regularly again. And the doors opened at Red Bull. Seems like every other team in Major League Soccer had found their number one goalkeeper except for New York, and now it looks like they're going to get a pretty good one, Luca, in Ethan Horvath. I'm excited about this move. What say you?
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I think back to Julian de Guzman at the season opening press conference where there was a question about have you figured out the goalkeeping position, and I personally was just like, they have so many keepers on the roster. They have John McCarthy. They're just gonna kind of ride it out until Marcucci's healthy. Come, maybe post World Cup. Given that the fact that they re-signed him, but no, de Guzman was like, we have not figured that out, admittedly, and that's something that we're still working on. And I was like, oh, okay, that's really interesting to think about because if you really take a look at it right now, we have four first team keepers on the Red Bulls roster, and that's something that I didn't think there'd be much wiggle room. But throwing Horvath in, which a lot of people in Red Bulls and MLS circles were saying is the best American keeper currently on the market, and so for the Red Bulls to snag him is an incredible signing. I'm just curious where it kind of leaves the rest of the roster, and we'll for the goalkeepers we'll get into that. But Horvath, yeah, definitely an interesting figure, and I feel like everyone just thinks of his 2021 Nations League final, where he came on for Zach Steffen and had the penalty kick save and uh, really put himself a lot more on the map. But it's interesting. I was surprised to see that he's 30, kind of, I guess, in the prime for goalkeepers, with the age being a bit older. But I'm really interested to see how he would test himself in MLS and get consistent playing time as a starter. I think he really has the potential to be at least a top 10 keeper in the league, maybe top five, depending on how he does. But really, really exciting for the Red Bulls. I think it's eased a lot of fans' concerns about John McCarthy, and we'll see where they go from here with the rest of the position.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that it makes things a little unclear for what they're going to do with all the goalkeepers that they have now. As many as five contracted to the first team at this moment, assuming the Horvath deal goes through. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the next signing that the Red Bull organization made. But sticking to Horvath for now, for me, it's a move that makes a ton of sense for him personally. Owned by parent club Cardiff City, who are top of League One, going to the championship. It looks pretty guaranteed that they're going to make that jump and be promoted. Spending the last season and a half with Sheffield Wednesday, where he was in and out of the starting role as a goalkeeper, and they're guaranteed relegation to League One from the championship. So he's a player who's a bit desperate to be at a club where he's going to be trusted with the starting job. And since he was at Luton Town in the championship, when he was a big part of the reason that they had that historic promotion to the Premier League, he's never really had a chance to be the out and out starter. He's never had that type of job security that he's definitely going to get in Major League Soccer. So I think it's a no brainer move for him, a player who might have been a little bit desperate to get out of the club situation he was in, and the Red Bulls were pretty desperate to get a starting goalkeeper. I think the timing lined up pretty nicely. And I do believe that he's one of the better goalkeepers MLS will have now, for sure. He's going to have to prove that, of course. He's coming in and it'll be a fresh start for him. And he's going to be in a crowded room of talented goalkeepers. In the Eastern Conference alone, there are now so many U.S. men's national team caliber goalkeepers. Matt Freese, Matt Turner, Patrick Schulte, Roman Celentano. He jumps right into that fold now. And if he can play up to the level of his contemporaries or perhaps above, I don't see why there's no reason he can't get back into the U.S. national team. He hasn't been called in since Mauricio Pochettino's first camp back in the fall of 2024. He hasn't played a match for the U.S. national team since he came off the bench at the Copa America for an injured Matt Turner. He was also Matt Turner's primary backup at the 2022 World Cup. And I think you mentioned, Luca, it's kind of surprising that he's already 30 to some of us, but it's hard. It might be hard for some to remember. His national team career started a lot earlier than some folks might know. He was at the 2016 Copa America, I believe. Jurgen Klinsmann brought him as the third keeper there when he was just climbing through the ranks at Molde as a teenager under then manager Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So he's a guy who's got quite a bit of experience, has played under some great managers for good teams. He was the starter at Club Brugge for a while in Belgium, where he played in the Champions League. This is a guy with a lot of experience. And some negatives that I will say that came out of his most recent stints in England with Cardiff, admittedly as Wales, and Sheffield Wednesday, is that he's good for a gaff every now and then. We'll have a blunder here and there, and that's not anything that should be new to Red Bulls fans. I mean, Carlos Coronel was a fantastic goalkeeper, but was due for an error or two, a bad one, every season. So I think New York fans can expect the same quality goalkeeper that they've had in the past 5 seasons with Coronel, that as they will have with Ethan Horvath. It's a great signing. It makes a lot of sense. It'll be interesting to see what his wage looks like, considering a championship caliber goalkeeper who's getting paid around £1 million. I expect that to come down a bit, given his desperation to be a starter somewhere. Or
he's a TAM player or something.
Or if he's a TAM player, I mean, the Red Bulls certainly have that type of roster availability right now. And of course, this is not the only goalkeeper they were linked with in the winter. Have to mention the reports out of Denmark that they went after Brøndby goalkeeper Gavin Beavers, the American who came from Real Salt Lake, and that bid was rejected. So they've got their goalkeeper now, and it's not the only goalkeeper that the club was bringing in this week. And they welcomed back hero from the MLS Next Pro Cup Championship, excuse me, it's a mouthful. Austin Causey, who had that penalty save, an absurd save in the second half of that game where he essentially was the hero through the playoffs. He came in for Aiden Stokes, who was the number 1 throughout the season. He was away at the U17 with the U.S. Youth National Team, and he stepped in, was great at the end of the MLS Next Pro season, and even better in the playoffs. He earned a contract to stay with the club for sure, but now that means between the first and second teams, 7 goalkeepers, including Horvath and draft pick Tomas Hutt. Luca, I don't know how they're going to be able to manage all these goalkeepers, but it is good to see Austin Causey back. He definitely deserved another chance to stay with the club after his service last year.
Yeah, I agree. I think Causey's great to keep around, but it is just so crowded, and it's an area that I think a lot of people think the Red Bulls Academy and a lot of people covering the USMNT say that, the Red Bulls goalkeeping pipeline is something to really buy into, and like Stokes and Tobias Ševčík and like a very strong homegrown core that, is contributing already at the national team youth levels. I think a solution to this has to be some type of, if you're not going to outright get rid of McCarthy after one game played, I do believe the Red Bulls didn't just pick up his Galaxy contract, but actually kind of extended his contract, I think 1 or 2 years, which was a kind of interesting wrinkle to this. So, assuming they did all that just to offload him after one game, is interesting. I think that's probably the best path forward. But otherwise, it's a type of loan, I would say. You're not going to offload Stokes. You're not going to offload Ševčík. You may not sign Tomas Hutt, really. Just have him kind of serve as maybe a third string for Red Bulls too, if they need that. Um, I don't know if it's wise to loan out Aiden Stokes at such a young age, but it could be something worthwhile for the club. I don't know if that's being loaned out to USL or maybe somewhere in Europe, kind of like what Marcucci did with Afghanistan and in Finland. But at least one piece has to give, if not two, honestly. Ševčík is obviously going to spend the whole season with Red Bulls too, but is on a first team contract, so I believe they can do like an intro loan to the second team, so that'll solve that there. Um, but otherwise, I don't think you want to loan Stokes to Red Bulls too for the whole season. I think it'd be great to see him maybe contribute in Open Cup before Marcucci is back fully healthy. Um, but yeah, I think my two solutions are just fully sell McCarthy somewhere, or do a loan for Aiden Stokes, or I guess McCarthy for that matter, but can't really see him going on loan really. Really fascinating to see what they're gonna come up with in the next 2 weeks.
It's certainly going to be interesting. I'm glad you mentioned the Marcucci loan because it was one that took a lot of people in New York circles by surprise, but he went to Finland and came back a better goalkeeper for it.
Yeah.
And that was a great career move for him. I mentioned on Twitter, I think, Stokes could potentially be a good suitor for like a USL championship level team. A loan there, I think, would be do great good for him to give him that responsibility of being the first team goalkeeper somewhere. But I think potentially Julian de Guzman could be casting a wide net in the event that there are many goalkeepers absent due to international duty.
Mhm.
Aiden Stokes and Toby Ševčík could potentially go somewhere with youth national teams. And if Ethan Horvath comes to New York and plays really well and he gets back into the U.S. national team, there's a chance he misses games. Of course, the World Cup will have a break through the MLS season throughout the summer, but MLS Next Pro will not have a break. And when MLS Next Pro players go to their youth national teams, the club goes on. We saw that last year in the playoffs. That's why Austin Causey
Yep.
came in. So if there's a world where Ethan Horvath gets called into the U.S. national team, and while there is a break for the World Cup, he'll miss time going to the U.S. camp ahead of the World Cup. They get a few weeks at least. I think it's maybe 3, maybe 4 weeks to prepare for the World Cup together. So that would see him miss maybe a match or two at the very minimum. I don't have the calendar in front of me. This is hypothetical, but let's say Horvath is gone. And at the same time, Stokes and Ševčík are playing with the U17 and U18 youth national teams or what have you. And then that leaves McCarthy to be the starter for the first team. And maybe at that point, Marcucci is back from injury. And then that leaves with the reserve side, you've got Tomas Hutt and you've got Austin Causey. So this might be cover that they need to have accounted for. But 7
Mhm.
goalkeepers just seems
Yeah.
like too much. I think the easiest solution would be a loan for a guy like Aiden Stokes, and unfortunately, it would also mean potentially selling a guy like John McCarthy because while they did add those years to his contract after acquiring him mid-season last year, they also gave a big extension to AJ Marcucci. So there's definitely some belief in him at the very least. So we'll see what happens with the goalkeepers. Certainly an interesting thing to keep our eye on, but the big story there is a new number one and one that Red Bulls fans can be really excited about. Let's talk about the midfield because Luca, you asked a very good question to Michael Bradley at the press conference this past week, particularly about the identity of the team shifting to a younger identity after last year, but also balancing that out with a player like Emil Forsberg. And he had an interesting point of talking about Forsberg as a player who could be an 8 in certain places, and talked about Gustav Berggren as a player who can be a 6. But I think you can do a better job of setting up this quote for me, because you were the one who asked the question. Just what did you learn from this interaction with Bradley, and then we'll play the clip after.
Yeah, I think ultimately he sees his midfield as very fluid. And Berggren, we didn't see too much of him specifically last season, but felt like more of an 8, more of a counterpart to Emil, and similar to Donkor in a lot of ways. Not more of like a deep lying 6, but it kind of seems like he's envisioning that a lot of these guys can kind of mix and match a little bit. Adrian Mehmeti will probably not be the out and out starter like a lot of people were thinking for a bulk of games. It kind of seems like a Berggren Donkor um, mix with Forsberg is going to be the strongest midfield for the team, and I kind of like that, to see the hunger and tenacity from a guy like Berggren and Donkor, to be able to maybe unlock parts of their game that we haven't necessarily seen, and maybe a bit more on the defensive end. I'm just so used to seeing the Red Bulls with a double pivot that it's kind of, I have to like unlearn how that is, because it feels like we've seen that for the last 5, 6 years. So I think it's going to be really interesting having more of like a singular holding 6, and that maybe could be an 8 that we haven't really seen play in that position more consistently. But yeah, here's my question to Michael Bradley from the presser a few days ago. Hi, Coach. Just as preseason starting up, curious your thoughts on where Emil Forsberg fits into the system with a bit more of a possession-based style. Are you kind of envisioning him still being more box to box, setting the tempo at his age, or maybe like a different type of role than maybe we've been used to over the past 2 years?
Emil has football, and he has intelligence, and he has experience, and he loves to play. So he has come in to preseason in a really good way, really excited, really motivated. I think in a short amount of time we've found a really good way together. And so obviously, for us to have a really good team this year, Emil is going to be a really important part to that. And we're going to make sure that we find the best ways to get the most out of him, and to make sure that he can show his quality. Talking a lot about just Emil still being this leader that we've been used to, obviously under Sandro Schwartz. He had what feels like more of an advanced role as a 10, and this maybe he's a bit more on like the left side of setup of 2 8s. So I'm excited to kind of see that nuance to his game. Maybe a bit less pressure of being the main attacking centerpiece behind the front 3 than we've seen the past 2 years. And I feel like if Berggren or Donkor or whoever's next to him in that 8 position can really elevate their game, I mean, this is a midfield that really can be unlocked to achieve a higher level that we haven't seen yet.
Saw Red Bulls 2 under Michael Bradley last season. That was kind of the MO of the midfield. It was Adrian Mehmeti sat deeper beneath to essentially level 8s and Benedetti and Nate Worth. It was often those two. And I mean, that midfield was killer. It was so fun to watch those 3. It's interesting because Forsberg obviously has the quality to play in a number of different roles and do it effectively, even at his age. But it's gotten to a point, though, where his best position might be a little bit harder to pinpoint, because the bulk of his career was an attacking left midfielder, played in a 4-4-2 generally, who would cut inside and act as a wide 10 in that way, and make plays in those half spaces. And he was borderline world class at that, right? He was one of the best players in the Bundesliga in that type of role. And he can't really be that type of player anymore. It's just the way football is, and you naturally have to adapt as a player. When I think of this in this midfield, at first I was like, well, he's got to be the out and out number 10. He doesn't have the legs, come back, collect the ball, and move things there. But if he's going to be constantly surrounded by players with legs like Donkor and Berggren, who are good shuttlers of the ball as well, I think Donkor, that's probably the most underrated aspect of his game. I think it makes sense. I think it's something that could tap into an extra level in Forsberg that we maybe haven't seen since he joined the club in 2024. So for him to have that level of attention to detail for a player like Emil, I think is obviously necessary if this team wants to have an extra level of success that they didn't have in 2025. It's absolutely something that they need to do, and I think it's going to be. It also aligns with the 4-3-3 model that Jurgen Klopp is imprinting on the rest of Red Bull. You think about Liverpool's teams; they didn't have an out-and-out number 10 when they were at their best. It was Fabinho set beneath Thiago and Alexis McAllister, and I'm mixing errors there. But the fact of the matter is, this is the same system we saw with Red Bulls 2. This shouldn't be a surprise. It's the same sort of thing they're integrating throughout the entire Red Bull pipeline here in New York and around the globe with all their networks. So it's going to be interesting to see how Forsberg factors in. And I think that could be an exciting one. Speaking of exciting, we've had our second preseason match reports come to us, coming out of IMG Academy. In the first match, the Red Bulls fell 3-1 to USL League One expansion side Sarasota Paradise, and didn't really go according to plan. They used two different 11s. The first one and the second, both a mix, it seemed, of starting guys and younger players. They went down 2-0 in the first half and looked like they were going to come back in the second half. Cade Cowell assisted Andy Rojas. But then later, they conceded a third goal just 4 or 5 minutes after the fact, lost 3-1. But I asked Michael Bradley, because we didn't get any information from that game outside of the live tweets, what went on in that game and what he thought. So here's Michael Bradley speaking about that now.
James Burley, Empire Soccer Report. Thank you for the time, Michael. You had your first look with the team in a competitive environment yesterday in that preseason match. All we know was from live tweets as it was behind closed doors. What did you see from that match, and particularly the group's response to going 2-0 down early?
Yeah, not the result that we wanted, but in a lot of ways, for 8 days into preseason, a lot of positives. And so, we will always be a group that is honest and real with ourselves in terms of now the results part of things, but we also understand that for where we are at this point, establishing ideas, continuing to build the base, make sure that we're, the relationships, the ideas, the connections, all of these things are still higher on the priority list. And so again, it was good to get everybody 45 minutes. We spent a good part of the morning going through things in a good way with the players and making sure that they see all the positives, and then understanding now as we continue to move ourselves along the details that will allow us to get better and better. But was good to get everybody 45 minutes under their belt, and we will in all ways now look forward to another chance to step on the field on Saturday against St. Louis.
Now, of course, we don't know anything that happened in that match other than what was tweeted out and when the goals were scored. But what we do know, as he would later allude to in a answer to Gary Redmond's question that followed up about the game, is that to that point of preseason, they had not trained set piece organization defensively outside of a couple or two minor details. And they were victimized on at least one set piece in that match. So take that with a grain of salt. And again, it's preseason, so none of the results really matter. But for Bradley to maybe ease things for some fans who had concerns after a 3-1 loss to a team that had never played as a professional side before and had just lost 6-0 to the New England Revolution days earlier. But they followed that up with some good news from, as we're recording this on Saturday, this morning they played St. Louis City SC and said hello to old friend Daniel Edelman. They'll meet again later in an MLS game this summer. But they took it to St. Louis City with a very strong starting 11 in the first half of that, and then rotated it in the second half as they had done. Looked like pretty close to the full starting 11. I'll put up the graphic on YouTube so people can see who started in that match. But it was 3-0 at halftime. They ended up winning 3-1. And I think the most exciting thing about that is Cade Cowell gets 4 assists in 2 preseason matches. He had a hat trick of assists in the first half of that game. We spoke about Cade Cowell the last time we made an episode, Luca, and we were saying it's going to be a challenge for him to be a better soccer player than we've seen before. He has all these intangible tools to his game. I think for me, it's more promising that he's racking up assists and making plays than just scoring goals. So for me, that's the most exciting thing that's come out of these 2 preseason matches, Luca.
Yeah, I agree. And again, grain of salt, because this was actually St. Louis's first preseason game, so we have to be mindful of that. But kind of going back to what we were talking about with Forsberg too, I think that also unlocks the left side a lot more if Cowell is really at his best. We saw that with Lewis Morgan playing above Forsberg. And if Cowell is producing like this throughout the season, it's going to be a very fun season. I mean, just the ability for him to even bang in a few goals too. But if he's able to kind of supply from that left side, maybe cut in, support back to the eights, like a meal at the top of the box, maybe, for a goal that Emil had today. And productive to see Jupo and Sofo scoring, obviously from the other sides of the field. A very, very strong first 45, as it is with preseason. It's always, one half is one lineup, another half is another lineup, and so you can't really take the whole game as one cohesive result that would be the same as in any MLS regular season game. We saw that second half 11, a much weaker, younger 11, was not able to produce any goals in the second half. They even had a chance from the penalty spot to make it 4-0, which was saved by Roman Burki. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how these guys can maybe elevate their game. It's positive seeing them get a lot of minutes and a lot of Red Bulls 2 guys in that lineup. And I think the way that preseason is moving, especially with how Michael Bradley mentioned, they're still in a very foundational phase. They're not working on the nitty gritty of set piece structure and things like that. I think starting to turn a corner a little bit. They'll be back home in a week to take on a USL Championship side. So again, not a full strength MLS side, but it seems like the pieces are moving just on the pure footballing level of Cowell being at the center of a lot of this. And yeah, you got to have a short memory in preseason, especially. I mean, just 3 days ago we were saying, or a lot of fans were saying rather, that the season's over, cancel the season. The team is losing to basically a semi-pro side that has now become professional in the past few weeks. Michael Batista on Seeing Red basically said it was closer to a group of pickup players than an actual professional team. Not to discredit Sarasota, obviously, but yeah, it's positive to see this from the guys, and even a little appearance from Nate Worth, Red Bulls 2 player, who maybe I could see them maybe throwing him a type of homegrown first team contract
Going to say that
to support the midfield, just because the midfield is a little light beyond Forsberg, Berggren, Donkor, and Wiki Carmona, who we haven't talked about, but still got minutes under his belt in this game. But ultimately a positive way to close out the Florida camp. But definitely don't get your hopes up too high. But by Cade Cowell, there's something there for sure. So very, very excited to see his hunger, especially in a World Cup year, as he maybe tries to sniff the USMNT a little bit more.
Yeah, if there's one takeaway, it's preseason, so don't take much. But it would be that Cade Cowell seems to have hit the ball rolling. That's exciting for sure. Another few lineup notes to make note of. In the first match against St. Louis City, it looked like Dylan Nealis was going to be used as a center back. Was in the back line with Juan Mina, Tim Parker, and Omar Valencia. That kind of leaves him as the odd man out. And we've seen him play as a center back traditionally in a back three. In that 2024 MLS Cup run, he was starting as a right side center back in that back three throughout the playoffs. Looks like he was starting next to Tim Parker in the first match. And then in the second match, it's, anybody's guess as to who played center back next to Noah Ayla, with the back line being Valencia, Ayla, Justin Che, and Dylan Nealis. It's between Che or Nealis. Based on the Sarasota game, perhaps Nealis is being looked at as a depth center back for the team right now, and Justin Che is competing to start at the right back position. But both of those guys have played center back before and can both play between right and center back. So we'll see when we know more, when we get to actually see the match and not just live tweets. We'll find out about that. As for players who have not been featured, Rold Mitchell, Cam Harper, Serge Ngoma, Aiden Jarvis, and I think most alarmingly, Marcelo Morales. None of those 5 guys have featured in preseason yet. Tanner Rossbo and Nate Worth made their preseason debuts today, alongside Dennis Yengor came in and played as well at the right back position. So we'll see about Marcelo Morales. There's been some chatter about him going back to Universidad de Chile, but then reports, came from outside of news around the club that it seemed like they weren't going to explore bringing him back on a loan. He had fitness issues coming into the team last season. Perhaps that's persisting again. I don't know. I think he has the highest ceiling, certainly, of any of the left backs contracted to New York's first team at the moment. We'll see what his situation is. Apologies for interrupting this great discussion between me and Luca, but just minutes after wrapping filming this episode, reports came out once again that the move for Marcelo Morales back to Universidad de Chile on loan were ramping up again, and it seems like that is going to be the case. So as you've been able to tell on the bottom line on your screen, if you're watching on YouTube, that is what's going on. As we were speaking about this, we thought that the talks had died down, as it seemed they had for a little while, but that looks like it's ramping back up, and that might be why Marcelo Morales hasn't played in either of the 2 Red Bulls preseason matches. So that's where we are, just interrupting to fill folks in on the details there. But enjoy the rest of the episode. And then Cam Harper coming back from that MCL surgery last summer. They're obviously still working to get him back integrated into the team. He is at training camp, of course. We'll see. Guys like Serge Ngoma, I think, has been mentioned in a player that could potentially be moved out of the club to make room for other incoming players. And Rold Mitchell, still one that has really impressed the last year with Red Bulls too, and I think maybe is working his way into the team with the Red Bulls first team. We'll see where he fits in next to guys like Julian Hall and Victor Bogas as support for Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting at the striker, and Tanner Rossborough as well fits in that category, I should say. But in terms of bringing more players in, it's going to be tricky for the club to go about that. It was revealed to me from a source within the club that currently they have 10 international spots after that deal they made with the Seattle Sounders to acquire 2 more. Each team starts with a baseline 8. I was curious to see if they had any left over from previous trades in previous seasons, but source within the club thinks that it's just 10 at the moment, which is a little bit shy of their current count of international players. They've got up to 14 at the moment, which I think that leaves them in a position where they've either got to find a way to move those players out, or get in more international spots, or get creative with using the Red Bulls too as a means of acquiring more international players. Currently, Red Bulls 2 just picked up 3 international spots from Toronto FC's reserves. So 14 international players with 10 spots. I mean, it seems like maybe we get the same thing with Juan Mina as we have in the past, where he doesn't count towards the roster, but he played in each of the 2 preseason matches and was a pretty heavy rotational piece under Michael Bradley with Red Bulls too. So we'll see what his role looks like. Just curious on how you see the roster build moving forward, because Tom Bogert seems to believe, at least on Soccer Wise, that the Red Bulls aren't done adding pieces, which I know is something that fans will love to have heard.
Yeah, I think fans could definitely expect a bit more movement of maybe 1 to 2 guys. Obviously, the goalkeeper position that we talked about earlier, but there definitely feels like there's a lot of pieces, especially in the attack and especially on the wings. Like Serge Ngoma, I think Daniel Reben mentioned on Seeing Red this week that he's not even at preseason camp. He's in New Jersey, and obviously his nagging injury history. Maybe there's something that's cropped up there, and so I think. I think it'll be really interesting to see how long the club is willing to hold on to a lot of these guys. I think another solution too to the international roster spots is we've seen players acquire green cards like right before the roster compliance deadline. I think I
I
remember like
wouldn't count on Red
yeah.
Bull New York to do that though.
Yeah, I mean it depends though. I do remember I think I believe the green cards for Drew Yearwood and then when Wiki Carmona and Carlos Cornell acquired theirs came like right at the roster compliance date was when the club announced them like a day or two before the season. And so I think that's something to I would not count on them to do that, but for outstanding players, um but I think they could maybe swing one or two green cards, maybe get another international roster spot somewhere, and then offload someone to Red Bulls too, for example. I think a mix of that is probably the most likely. Um, what's actually interesting is the transfer with Seattle to acquire those spots was the exact same
Same one.
as the previous season from Seattle, similar amount of GAM. And so maybe they just have these GAM suitors around the league that they know they can, you know, have deals with year over year for international spots. So maybe there will be, one more announcement, but I think it's interesting to really delve into the deeper levels of what the international roster spots really account for on the roster because when you see that, you immediately think, oh, that means new signings are coming. But in reality, you can sign an international player before having the spot to accommodate them by the compliance date the day before the season starts. And so it's kind of a mismatched order. And I think for a lot of fans listening who might not know that all of these moves can kind of happen in flux with each other. Getting a bunch of new spots doesn't necessarily mean new signings. And we've seen them really prioritize domestic talent. Obviously, Justin Che, Cade Cowell, now Ethan Horvath don't need to be on any of these spots, but they've mostly brought in a lot of young South American talent through the second team and not really been outsourcing this year. So it's been interesting to see their transfer strategy from outside really be only Americans because the past 2 years it kind of felt like the opposite, bringing in European guys. Obviously, Robert Veloter is the one exception to that, but I believe
He's
he
got a green card.
has a green card exactly. So they have a very domestic strategy this year because of a lot of their young guys being South American talent, and we'll see if they can figure it all out. There's still a lot of pieces to the puzzle to be solved.
A couple of things I want to mention there before we get into a little bit of a rumor that has not really much traction to it, but we're going to mention it anyway. You mentioned the GAM that the Red Bulls sent away as a means of getting those two same international spots back from the Seattle Sounders. At the end of last season, the Red Bulls were pretty much drained of all their GAM. Now they've built it quite up with some of the players that they've offloaded throughout the league. They've got over $5 million in GAM. That's ranked 13th in the league. It's a respectable amount that they can use to spend on incoming players. They can use to buy down contracts. They can use that for a number of different things, more international spots if that's what it's going to take to get this roster to be compliant. And you mentioned the domestic forward strategy. It's absolutely true, especially within positions that they've mentioned, like the goalkeeper position. The one area where they haven't really prioritized domestic talent and not even homegrown talent, that's in the deep lying areas of midfield. They sent away Daniel Edelman. They sent away Peter Stroud. And it seems like they're preferring guys like Berggren and Donkor, and of course, giving an opportunity for Adri Mehmeti to show his worth at this level. I think that speaks to the value they see on Ronnie Donkor. I think he's one of the more underrated players in this roster. I think he maybe was underappreciated last season in terms of having to have more responsibility and pushing the games forward, coming off the bench in many occasions for an Edelman or a Stroud. I thought Donkor is one who earned his right to be at this level, and it's pretty clear that that's the direction they want to have the team go in. Because we mentioned this before, Luca, Edelman and Stroud to me feel like similar enough players where you get what you get from one or the other for the most part. I would argue that Edelman has the edge as the better player because he gets more stuck in defensively. Not that Peter Stroud doesn't. They're both good players, and I both hope they succeed at St. Louis and Minnesota respectively. But just something I think that we should keep our eye on Ronnie Donkor. He got a glowing review on MLSsoccer.com from the armchair analyst Matt Doyle. Drew comparisons to Darlington Nagbe. I mean, that's about as high praise as a central midfielder can get in MLS terms. So that's exciting. As for the aforementioned rumor, mostly Bull NY on Twitter brought this to my attention, as he often does. Some of this very, very good investigative, as
Detective
it
work,
were,
yeah.
work in the social medias and all the reports. He finds everything and pointed in my direction to Pumas winger Mexican American Jorge Ruvalcaba, who's been capped by the Mexican national team and is still in that sort of discussion as a bubble player for the national team for El Tri ahead of the World Cup. He was rumored to be on his way out of Pumas to go to Toluca last summer. He's been linked with multiple moves abroad and within MLS this winter, although no clubs have been named. He did recently follow Red Bull New York on Instagram. The only other teams he follows are his club Pumas and Real Madrid, which I'm sure he's a fan of because, let's face it, they're the biggest club in the world. I don't know. I think that there could be something there. It would align with the domestic interest that Red Bull has shown this offseason. I think it would be a linear move for his career, perhaps going from Liga MX to MLS, but he doesn't strike me as the type of player who would leave Pumas and go and start for a mid-table Bundesliga team and really move the needle. It seems like he is at this level at this point in his career, and it's the type of player that Red Bull seems to be targeting at this moment. I don't see why this wouldn't be a move that they would at least explore. Again, there's not much smoke here, so the old saying, when there's smoke, there's fire. Well, maybe we create a little smoke here. Who knows? Luca, what do you think? I think it's the type of player they absolutely should be in the market for, and I think he would improve this roster.
Yeah, I think they should absolutely be in the market for a guy like this, a guy who is domestic but has experience in Liga MX, very similar to Cade Cowell. I believe he has like 75 plus appearances in Liga MX at 24 years old, and I think he's a bit more in his prime than a lot of these younger guys, and I think would absolutely elevate the wing. I think you'd need to probably offload a guy like Goma or some piece has to give. Again, we're talking about a roster that is now ballooning at, I believe, 30, if not more players. So I think it's one of those final pieces that he's not necessarily going to be a DP winger like a lot of fans were clamoring for. Maybe he even could be. Surprisingly, we've seen a few DPs come through the halls here that kind of make you scratch your head and think they're not on the same level as a Chupo or an Emil Forsberg. But I think a guy like that really would help to lift up the guys around him. I think when your strongest wingers, besides Cowell and Harper, are kind of these younger guys, I think you need a bit more of a mid-20s leadership, and kind of outsourcing from Liga MX, as we've seen with Cowell. I think it's something that they're very open to. And I think, yeah, he could be a great little piece to help elevate this team. I think, just because when we think of any new signing, you think, is it going to be a DP or not? I think we should not really be holding out hope for a third DP at this point. But again, if you're signing guys with intention to really elevate the attack beyond just the Red Bull Stew promotions, and bringing out Harper and Sofo and maybe a few Goma minutes for another year with the additions of Mosquera and Rojas and all that, I think they're definitely showing an intention to still upgrade things. Maybe not in as high octane of a way as fans would like, but to me, there's definitely a lot of positivity in just seeing the proactiveness and the continued investment and interest in the roster. Again, maybe not a lot of smoke here, but I think would be a nice little addition as we kind of get to the tail end of preseason.
I think he kind of fits, in terms of the Mexican national team, the same sort of category that Cade Cowell fits in within the U.S. national team.
Exactly,
a player
yeah.
who's been in and around camps, has been called up in an official setting and in a quote-unquote unofficial setting like a January camp, and has played, has performed, and it is close to that range, at least close enough to still be in conversation. One thing I do want to clarify: Serge Ngoma is with the team in Florida.
Wow.
I don't know if he joined later or if that was just misunderstanding about his location, but he is with the team now. Hasn't played in preseason. We'll see what his status is moving forward. It's unfortunate his injury history has really hurt him from reaching his potential. Just such a talented player and a gifted athlete. But he's, again, one of those guys who might have to make way for a player like a Ruvalcaba, who is 24 years old and has 70 plus Liga MX appearances beneath his legs. And that would be a very, very big crutch for the Red Bulls. You bring in a player like him, suddenly you go from having your starting wingers on any given day in 2025 be Wiki Carmona and Mohamed Sofo, to you have Cowell, you have Ruvalcaba, you have Harper, you have Sofo off the bench, you have Rojas and Mosquera, and that's assuming that they don't also bring in a DP winger. Remind you, when you went live on Instagram, Luca, which was, I thought was a great time. I really enjoyed you doing that. I thought that was a great
I'll be doing
discussion.
some more for anyone listening. If anyone, I don't know if I'm going to keep up a schedule of it, but good to just like have the open forum. So anyway,
I really
that's my
enjoyed
little
that,
plug.
and I think you should. I would encourage it. We both mentioned at one point in each of their careers, both Julian de Guzman and Michael Bradley were DP holding midfielders. I don't know if there's room for that in the squad with Gustav Berggren being a TAM player, and it looks like he's going to be that single pivot number 6 with Donkor and Forsberg in front of him. At least that's how the squad looks now on paper, and maybe Adri Mehmedi is the understudy there. So we'll see what they do with that third DP. Julian de Guzman himself said it back in October. It is a big target to get a third DP. We don't know if that's something they'll be able to do before the season kicks off, but assuming that there's juice to this Ruvalcaba thing, that's a big if, assuming that. But there's the team's starting to take a little bit more shape, and we don't think that they're done. So with that said, what areas on the pitch, we just spoke about it a little bit, do you think they should still continue to explore? I think there's some obvious areas here, Luca, but why don't you start and give us a gauge on where you think they really need to continue to beef up this roster?
Yeah, I think unless Dylan Nealis is going to be this right center back, you've got to get at least one more center back to really shore things up. I think if you're really playing 3 center backs in a rotation is a little dicey, and then a right back kind of turned into a center back is not ideal. But I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of keep it that way as well. And I would say besides that, it's some type of holding mid that can kind of compete a bit more with Mehmedi or any of the 2 8s that kind of maybe drop down and convert into a 6 on any given day. Just to really shore up that spot, just because we had a big exodus with Edelman and Stroud leaving. And then I think it's some type of winger. Maybe it's Ruvalcaba, maybe it's more of a DP caliber player. But those are the 3 really, especially with the addition of Ethan Horvath. Besides that, this squad is pretty much ready, and a lot of young guys who, their contributions will remain to be seen, especially at striker. I think the depth chart is like 5 guys, and 4 of them are like Victor Bogac's U22, and then it's Hall, Rosborough, and Mitchell. So we'll see really how they can kind of reach their next level. But I think striker is pretty much set. Left wing pretty much set. The 8s are pretty much set. Wing backs pretty much. It's really just one center back, one CDM, and then like maybe a type of winger. But I kind of prioritize CDM and center back over a more attacking signing.
Yeah, it kind of feels like, should Ronald Donkor be unavailable for any given match, it's a who's who of who's going to step into that role. Is it going to be Benedetti? But it feels like he should be behind Forsberg and be a little bit higher up the pitch. Carmona, same thing. So I that's an area that definitely I identify as needing at least another body there. Right back and center back now, it's kind of have to put those 2 together, because if you see Justin Che or Dylan Nealis as your depth center back piece, well then you kind of need to add another body at right back, unless Dennis Yangor and Cameron Harper are guys that you feel can contribute in that area. De Guzman did mention Harper as a right back in October in that press conference. We haven't seen Harper at all this preseason. We don't know what role he's playing. I thought he's looked best for Red Bull New York when he was playing as that right wing back in that back three, back five, whatever you want to call it. Essentially the same thing. And I think that could be another role for him. We'll see as it goes to that. And then on the wing, if it were up to me, that would be where you put your DP money.
Yeah,
Get more attacking power into this team. And if it's not the route they go and they bring in a player who would be fall underneath the DP category and probably underneath the TAM category in a Ruvalcaba, I still think that would be a positive signing.
Yeah,
I still think that would be moving things in the right direction. You know, earlier this week, people were starting to get a little bit more restless. We spoke about it, Luca. We were like, they're clearly building towards something. It looks like they're only halfway, 2/3 of the way finished to making a squad. And I think people were still thinking that earlier this week, but started to get a little bit worried that maybe with the announcement of the rejected move for Gavin Beavers, and then there was an additional rejected move coming out of Argentina for Bocio that I wrote about in Empire Soccer Report. You can check that out. It seems as though that maybe they were trying and not succeeding, but the Horvath news, I think, brought a lot of people's tensions back down, and people are a little bit more excited than they were a few days ago. And scoring 3 goals in the first half and getting a hat trick of assists from Cade Cowell against St. Louis City certainly helps that as well. But we've come to the end of episode 4 of Empire Soccer Report. I want to thank Luca Richman of the RBNY Experience for coming back on and sharing some of his expertise around the club. Great having you on, Luca. Please stay warm tomorrow, man. And is there anything exciting that we can expect from you in the coming days?
No, I mean, just I think it's an exciting little preseason it's shaping up to be. I'll have other types of fun content outside of the regular preseason cadence. Obviously, last week was like the 2016 trend. I had to, go look back in my old Instagram likes from the Red Bulls account there. So thinking of a few more archival things, maybe a few things kind of beyond what's going on the field at the club and more off the field discussion. As I know a lot of people have passions and perspectives on. But yeah, excited for another big season. We're within 30 days. Doesn't feel like it with the snow and everything, but it really is starting up real soon. I'm excited for the ride. Let's do it.
Red Bulls got a few more preseason matches. They're going to come back home to New Jersey. They're going to play against Hartford Athletic. Then they're going to go to the Torneo de Tejas. And all this, we're under a month away from the MLS season kicking off. 2026 shaping up to be an exciting one. Thank you to Luca Richman of the RBNY Experience. I've been James Burley. This has been Empire Soccer Report. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you next time.